Well, what we're going to do tonight is talk about some friends that we've lost in the last few years. We went through a couple of years when we didn't meet at all. Generally, in the past, we've always recognized those that we've lost each year at the conventions, and we sort of lost that when we went to virtual conventions, and now we're trying to get it back. We're trying to get everything in EAC back to how it was before COVID, and I think we're doing a good job of it, and we'll be even closer to getting back to before COVID next year. But anyway, Friends Remember, this is what this is about, and it's not supposed to be about any one person. It's about all the people that we've lost. There may be people that Chuck and I could not think of that we've lost, and if there is somebody that we haven't talked about, at the end, please bring it up. They shared their knowledge with us, they shared their collections with us, they bid with us and often against us. We ate a meal with them, raised a glass, discussed ideas, agreed and disagreed, laughter with their jokes, tears with their sorrows, frequent contact and not enough contact. That's Chuck, and I thought it was beautiful. But we walked with them and we called them friends. I am not supposed to drink alcohol anymore, but I thought for this I should raise a glass to all these people. A toast first to all of those that we lost. And we don't need to toast everyone individually, but if you wish to, go right ahead. So, Chuck.
I just want to thank Bill for asking me to be part of this. He was in charge, he was doing it. I said I would do the PowerPoint, and he let me go a little crazy.
Chuck is never crazy.
There's one person I just want to say thank you. Some months ago, Tim Skinsky and I had the opportunity to talk in detail about things that we have missed over the years. And when Bill had this opportunity to do something special, I want to thank Tim for providing the basic ideas to me behind it. I can't think for myself anymore. Most of you in here know my wife Karen. She does the hard thinking. I just try to carry it out. But thank you, Bill. Thank you. Other than that, thank you, Tim, for helping me. Shall we go?
Yeah, hit it.
Clem Scatino.
Yeah.
This is in order. Oh, yeah, Mark. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Right. I'm sorry. Clem Scatino. This is in order of the one that has passed longest ago. So Clem, as you all know, very big into the colonial coins. He died in 2020. And we're asking if anybody has anything they would like to talk about Clem, to please get up and scream it out so everybody can hear what you have to say.
Clem and I used to have daytime drinks after the convention was over. He was my drinking buddy. He wasn't gone home.
Are you saying that Clem drank? I had no idea.
What's he holding here?
Oh, yeah. At one point, Clem's doctor told him if he didn't stop drinking, he'd be dead in 6 months. This was about 15 years ago. So he stopped drinking, and he stopped drinking for a period of about 2 months. In those 2 months, he would go to coin shows, and he would order old Duels beers, the non-alcoholic beer, which was still like, a fraction of 1% of beer. And he would polish off 40 bottles, 60 bottles, so he still got the exact same amount of alcohol, about quadruple times 100 the calories. But, Clem, the coin world's a little sadder without him there. I mean, he was always full of laughter, always full of fun.
Very colorful.
Very colorful man, yeah.
And he went by the name of Copper Clem.
That's right.
Copper Clem.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Mark Borkhardt.
On occasion, a few of us would get together and have, at coin shows, have little evening poker games, penny, any kind of stuff, maybe nickels and dimes or whatever it was. Clem had no idea what he was doing. And as I recall, it was very beneficial for the rest of us.
You fleeced the kid?
Oh, no.
Just say one thing.
Mike.
That's a very unusual picture of Clem. I never saw him wearing long pants, always shorts, and generally he had the t-shirts with straps, so he didn't like long pants and he didn't like sleeves.
That's true. Clem could sweat
Oh my God.
in an igloo.
That's what.
I've never met a guy that wore shorts when it was snowing in Boston.
Can't sweat.
Anyway, we're good?
Anybody else? Good. I'll take a sip of fun.
Sid Martin. Can't say enough about Sid. Passed in 2021. Head of the ANS. Jesse, what was his title at the ANS?
President.
The president, yes, right. He was president of the board, right. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. And he's well known for his colonial collection, which was voluminous. But anybody have anything to say about Sid? He wrote books. Oh, go ahead.
Lots of books.
Mark?
I received a phone call from Sid. I don't recall exactly the topic of the conversation, but what I do recall is that he was telling me of his health issues, and his exact words were, "Mark, I do not have much runway left." The very next day, I learned of his passing.
Yes, it was colonial. I guess I'll talk a little bit of him. This is a man whose entire life was busy with work. He had a family. He had philanthropic things that he did. He managed to write 5 books in a very short period of time, each of which will be standard references for a century or more. On top of that, he collected 30,000 colonial coins, looked at every single one of them, studied every single one. This is a person, if any of you are Harry Potter fans, and they have the time turner, he must have had it. He crammed 80 hours into a 24-hour day somehow, and he was always available for more. The Colonial Club, our journal, was kind of going downhill. We needed an editor. He took over, turned it into an award-winning journal. He promised 4 issues a year. They were out on the day he promised, without fail. How this man crammed everything in, I'll never know. I feel lazy in comparison to him. So.
Yeah, his books were on Hibernia coppers,
Yep.
Rosa Americana coppers, St. Patrick, and what was the fourth?
The French colonies.
The French colonies.
Mark, yeah.
To give you an idea of Sid, when he was, this is what I've been told, when he was working on the variety book of St. Patrick's coppers, for instance, he bought every one that ever appeared in the marketplace. And that's how he studied them to create the variety books. I mean, St. Patrick's coppers are not common.
They were less common when he was buying them, that's for sure.
I understand that he had over 1,000 of them.
Easily. And actually, I would call him once, and he's like, I'm sitting on the floor, and I have like 2,000 St. Patrick carvings on the floor, and I'm putting them in piles by variety. So if the pile is this big, it's an R8. If the pile is this big, it's an R6.
He also collected items related to George Washington.
Yeah, the 32s, yeah.
Anybody else? Sid also, if you didn't know him, he was a very large guy.
Yeah.
He was one of these people that made me feel like a like a little junior collector or something. Go ahead.
What I felt like.
I never met the man, but he benefited from his editorship of the journal and the books that he's written, and his coins are still being prolific. I mean, the auctions are in progress, and I feel lucky that I've gotten a handful of them from auctions that have already been more to come.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
Just a
Mike?
couple of things. He loved Connecticut coppers. And my understanding is there are about 360 varieties of Connecticut coppers. And he had 3 collections at the same time, all of them over 300 varieties. His most expensive collection, I think, is 352. So out of 360, so that's incredibly impressive. But he collected far beyond coins. He had paintings from the Civil War, had one of the world's best pocket watch collections. Just really very interesting, broad-minded man with incredible range.
Next. Now, George Trostel. I have a story. When we were in Dallas, Texas, and for that convention, I stayed at the Boers table, and Karen went on one of the excursions to some kind of a park. And George was in the group, and Karen, not being able to maybe see what was going on, stepped up on like what she thought was a rock. And actually, it was a fire ant pile. Now, I don't know how you take a fire ant pile for a rock, but she got up on it, and all of a sudden, she was, it was warm in Texas, and she's getting bit, she's knocking off the ants. George came over, swooped her up, and carried her off, and dusted her off, and you know what the fire ants leave on skin. So George is not just Karen's hero, he's my hero because of the things that he did. And I just one little aside, whenever we would go to a convention, whether it was EAC or especially the fun convention, George would always get there a little early. And I'll be damned if we weren't walking down the hall in opposite directions and I would see him. It was uncanny. It didn't just happen once or twice. It was just like divine interference to George. That's my story. Love the guy. He was a great man. Connecticut, by the way. Anybody have anything to add about George?
Okay.
So I'm originally
sorry,
from...
I can't go back.
I'm so sorry, but I have to insist. So I'm originally from Connecticut. I grew up there. And I think I was a Region 7 chairman at the time, and there was a vacancy for the whatever region that was. I think it's Region 1, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I said, there's a vacancy, and you're the only one I can remember from all my buddies back in Connecticut. Would you be the chairman of Region 1? He said, I never thought about it, but of course I would do that. That's the spirit of EAC.
Yes.
Is that when somebody is asked to do something, even if it's totally unexpected, the people rise to the occasion. That's George.
Yeah. Thank you.
Jack Robinson. Who would like to talk about Jack Robinson? We all know about CQR, I hope. I have a complete set of CQRs that I'm going to donate to next year's sale. So if you have not kept up on your CQRs, your chance to get them all. They are a little old, but I think people still look at them. Chris.
Well, I love Jack. Jack's favorite sayings were, "Are we having fun yet?" And I came to play. So he entered into the large cent collecting in a big way because he liked to do everything. in a very, very, very big way. And I think what was wonderful is that Jack had really close relations with people, even the people that he really pissed off, which was a broad spectrum of people here. People called CQR a self-fulfilling prophecy, people that knew a lot about coins. And so I had been working with Jack for a while in the 80s, and he made an investment in a commercial laundry that kind of went bad. So Jack soon was in the laundry business and persevered in there. He had some kind of contraption that would inject ozone into ballast water in ships and would kill all the little creepy crawlers that ships would take up in ballast water in Indonesia, and then would come into San Francisco harbor and dump all the ballast water into the bay. And next thing you know, we had all sorts of little Indonesian zebra mussels and things like that. So he was just a guy that pursued everything with absolute passion. And so that's my remembrance of Jack, and I miss him.
Thanks. Thank you, Chris.
Back in the mid-1980s, Jack had an auction firm called McLaughlin and Robinson.
That's right. Yes.
And he was an early proponent of computer equipment by a company called Victor. And for some reason, at about that same time, when I was working with my dad in our coin shop in Ohio, we had acquired and started using a Victor computer. So Jack got wind of that, and he immediately got a hold of us, and we were able to start working with him in terms of consignments to his auctions because we spoke the same computer language in the mid-1980s. There was another time at a Long Beach convention. I had traveled from Ohio to Long Beach, and a friend of mine had also traveled from Ohio to Long Beach, and he represented a company called Toledo Coin Exchange. And he came up and he said, "Mark, I know you guys deal in large cents. Why don't you buy my large cent inventory?" And I said, "Well, I will if I can." And his inventory was 3 coins. There was an 1800, an 1802, and some other coin I don't remember now. And I asked him the price, and he told me, and I said to him, "The only way I can pay your price is if these are better varieties." So he actually let me look them up. The 1800 was a Rarity 6 Sheldon 210. The 1802 was an NC1. And I don't remember what the other one was. It didn't matter. I said, "Okay, I'll buy that." To which he had an expletive to reply with, but he sold them to me. Dan DeMayo, who many of you know, purchased the 1802 NC1, and Jack Robinson purchased the 1800 S210.
A lot of you, that have been around for a while do know about copper quotes by Robinson. What you may not know is that the way he came up with the values in that was by looking at the sale price in recent auctions. So if you had a variety and it was in, say, XF40, he might have a price that was like $5,320 or something. And you wonder, how the heck did he come up with that? That was what the hammer plus the juice was in a recent auction. And some of that would get to be misleading. There was a coin that sold in the, I'm not going to talk about the coin because somebody might be in the room that knows about it, but it sold in the Dan Holmes sale for about $5,000. I'm not giving the actual numbers. Sold in another sale a year later for about $4,000. And then I bought it the next year for about $3,000. And when I bought it, I told Susan, I told my wife that either there's no downside in this or I got to give it away, one or the other. So the values that you get from somebody who really compiles all the details are not necessarily the very best. You have to use your own mind as well. Good guy.
I've got a quick story about Jack. When I was doing the educational coordination for EAC, I think I did for eight conventions in a row. And there were 3 people, more than 3 that I could rely on, of course, if I needed, Frank Noel was always helping. But my big 3, if I called them, they would just say, yes, I'll do it. I didn't even have to ask. And one of the big 3, of course, was Jack, who would always do something. The other one was John Krailovich, who's not here today. And the other one sitting with us, it was Mark Borkhardt. Mark Borkhardt actually did answer the phone. He saw it was me, and he said, yeah, I'll do it. You remember that?
I do.
I remember that. Well, there's to Jack. Thank you, Jack. Gary.
Well, it was only a short thing, but back in the 70s, I think it was at the, I want to say the TAD sale by Stax that Doug Smith cataloged. And a lot of us were pretty poor back then. So I spent the night with Jack and about 2 or 3 other EACers, because Del Bland always had the bathtub in Doug Smith's apartment. And I remember sleeping, or not sleeping, next to Jack the entire night, and he never stopped talking. So we really got to know each other then. That was a hoot. Doug Smith, that was a different story.
That's good. Thanks, Gary. Chuck?
Dennis?
Oh, Dennis, sorry.
I know, you can't go,
I can't go back.
go back.
But you can talk.
I can wait. Okay. So this is not completely a Jack story, but it is kind of a Jack and a Doug Bird story. As you probably all know, or most of the old timers, Jack sold his extensive Larson collection, I think it was 1989, and Superior cataloged the sale. And I kind of got into collecting seriously in the early 90s or mid-90s, somewhere along there. And one of my go-to people was Doug Bird. And I would go to Doug's table at the Long Beach show every time. And at one point I noticed that he had this ragged, beat-down old copy of the Jack Robinson sale at his table. He goes, oh yeah, this is my reference book because it's got all the dice dates. That's what he was using it for. Things have improved a little bit on that front, thanks to Noise and some of the other authors out there.
Richard Nachbar, I know that Harry has something to say about him. Okay.
Back around 2000, a friend whose dad had died without a will and who had collected rolls and bags of Morgan dollars back in the early 60s. He probably paid $1.10 a piece for uncirculated coins. I went through all this stuff for this friend, and I told her that it was one of those things where they say, I've got some coins, you want to come over and take a look? And you expect to see, 3 Indian cents and a couple of buffalo nickels, and it's all in a box. And this was, a room full of stuff. So I told her I'd be happy to do this, but I need to have some pay for it. And so we agreed that I would pick out $1, a Morgan dollar, for each hour I spent working on this. Okay, I spent 62 hours on it. So I ended up with a roll of 80S, a roll of 81S, and a roll of 82S. Okay? And a couple of odd 79S or something. Okay, so 20 years go by. I don't know anything about this. I mean, they're Morgan dollars. They're all, they're big and beautiful, and I mean, these were my hand-picked ones, but how the slabbers would grade these, I was clueless. So I sent a few of them in, and on the 81S's in particular, I started getting these MS-67, MS-67, MS-68. I thought, I don't know how to market these, not in my ballpark. Well, I ended up contacting Richard, and he said, well, send them. Send them to me. So I sent him the whole schmear, other than, well, my daughter was born in 1979, And my son was born in 1981, so I saved one of the best 79 S's and one of the best 81 S's for them, respectively. And Richard got the other 60. He sends me he said he got them, and the next day he calls me and he says, you know, I think I can sell these for, you know, gives me a figure. I said, well, that sounds great. And a couple days later, I got a check. And I thought, that's the end of this. About 2 weeks after that, 2-3 weeks after that, my P.O. box, here's another envelope from Williamstown, New York, with a little note from Richard in it that says, I told you if I was going to do a little bit better, I'd give you a little bit more, and here it is. And there was like another check for $1,000 in there. You know, the man did not have to do that, but he did.
Wow.
Richard Nachbar was one of my very close friends in the coin business. In 1987, September 1987, we were both at a coin show in Plymouth, Michigan. And being starving coin dealers at the time, we were sharing a hotel room to cut down on expenses. Sunday morning, September 20th, 1987, at about 5:30 in the morning, the telephone rings in the hotel room. Richard answers the phone. He says, just a minute, and he says, Mark, it's for you. And it was my wife who was calling to say that she was on the way to the hospital to give birth to our twin daughters. It's a day I'll never forget. He's a man I'll never forget.
Good.
Thank you. That's nice.
Very nice. Anybody else?
Okay, so not everybody in this room knows Richard that well. He was more a marketer, a wholesale dealer and a buyer of coins. But he affected a large number of people, like someone like Mark, so the story I would have is that many of you do know who David McCarthy is now, because he's one of the foremost researchers of coins. Wherever Jesse Kraft is, if he's in here. but in any case, Jesse, you know David very well, I think, by now. In any case, David McCarthy's mother worked for Richard Nachbar. And David McCarthy had nothing to do with coins at all until he met Richard Nachbar. And I think there's a number of people that were influenced by Richard that we would know those people, though we didn't know him necessarily that well.
There's actually another story about Richard. In 1996, when I was working for Bowers & Morena, we handled a collection called the Pennsylvania Cabinet. It was actually sold in 1997. Now, I don't know if any of you are aware that the original collector of the Pennsylvania Cabinet was a very well-known large cent collector by the name of Dr. James Sloss. And his widow, Saran, had us come to Beaver, Pennsylvania. And I went there to go through all this stuff. There was a substantial auction consignment, but then there was his bullion. He had bank boxes that were about this tall off the floor. They were about this wide and probably 4 feet deep. And there were like 5 of these bank boxes full of gold and silver bullion. Richard is the person that I called in to handle all of the bullion from the Sloss collection. And he treated them very fairly, as he treated everybody.
That's true, he was big on the bullion. The gold, bug.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
No?
I have to be honest, I never met Steve Lund. I have no recollection of him. Does anybody?
I have no real recollection of him. But having once lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I like the sweatshirt or the jacket.
Go blue.
Wait a minute, you got your opposition right here next to me, aren't, don't you?
No,
Go blue. That's-
go blue.
Oh, you're not Ohio State?
Chuck, you don't know what you just said.
I know, I said a curse word, didn't I?
But I actually
Anybody
married-
Ohio State fans?
Chuck, Chuck, I actually married an Ohio State girl.
Wow, that must be a household tip.
There used to be a TV commercial that showed a guy with a Michigan shirt and a girl with an Ohio shirt, and the two of them were making out on the couch, and the caption said, "Without sports, this wouldn't be wrong."
That's true.
Emily is angry because we said a bad thing about the school that's near her.
Yes, we
Although
did.
she
Yes,
did
we
not
did.
go to that school, she went to
Well,
Purdue.
my husband did, so I asked to go from the
Anybody? Bob?
Steve didn't come to conventions very often. He lived on the West Coast and he didn't like to travel. So Steve came to Portland and met Steve then, and then when I wrote an obituary with him. I corresponded a couple of times, but hadn't heard from him in a long time. And a couple of years ago, in 2021, I got an email and said, "I don't know if this is your address anymore, email, but if it is, do you mind contacting me?" So I did. And he basically said, "I've been sick, I got cancer, I thought I'd beat it. I done terminal, going to hospice." And I remember when we did some things with some research, you'd ask me information about the Roger Cohen book that he contributed and got one of the special editions. Would you be interested in it? What would you pay for it? I don't know what you pay for it, but that's what EAC is. And I've heard from him for several years, but you remember that. Send things off. But one book and Steve.
Anybody else?
Thanks, Bob. Jim Wigan. Hey,
Some of you have met him.
we don't have enough time for everybody to say something, but please, go. Come on, don't be shy.
All right.
The Wigan touched everybody in this place.
Pretty much all of you know about the current half-cent, large cent, and colonial happenings. But how many of you actually know where those started and when they started?
And why they're called happenings.
And why they're called happenings? I believe Frank Wilkinson came up with the name happenings.
Is that right, Frankie?
I believe so. The first half-cent happening was at Jim McGuigan's apartment in Ann Arbor, Michigan in November 1975. Those attending were Jim. I don't think John Lusk was there because I think he had another obligation. Frank Wilkinson was there. Gene Bragg from Elyria, Ohio was there. And I was there. There were four of us. The next year, I believe that John and Sally Lusk held the happening in 1976 at John's home. And there was quite a group,
How many?
probably 15 maybe. And then it expanded from there. But the first one was four of us in Ann Arbor, Michigan in 1975.
And I understand that there really were no drugs, that's just a rumor. And, am I wrong?
If there was any kind of illegal substance there, I was not made aware of it.
Oh.
But of course, in 1975, I was not terribly old, like 17.
There is a reason it was called a happening, let's put it that way.
More recently, I had the pleasure of writing the entire auction catalog for Jim's half-cent collection, which I tried to write it in a very similar style to Walt's large cent catalog from 2008. I think the two of them complemented each other fairly well. And I tried to make the catalog a tribute to Jim, and hopefully I succeeded.
And he did.
Excellent.
Anybody else?
Well, I got one more, and so Jim was such an interesting guy, and his best friend that I knew of was Steve Fisher, and they were a remarkable contrast in people. Jim being very, very intellectual, very quiet, relatively small in stature, and Steve Fisher was a linebacker, nose tackle at South Dakota State University, and looked like a guy you really wouldn't want to run into in a dark alley.
Or anywhere else.
So, and Jim was kind of, he loved coins and was very focused on them. He was a bachelor gentleman, I think,
Almost.
in old school,
Almost
almost his whole life.
Almost his whole life.
And then he met Claire, and the next thing you know, he's traveling all over the world. And I think that the reason I bring it up is just that I think that Jim had extraordinarily happy years there at the end part of his life. So it was a pretty happy, fulfilled life for a guy that everybody loved. Everybody.
Yeah, I think he was probably about 70 years old when they got married.
Yeah.
Bob. I just, again, reflects on Jim, but many of you met my wife last year at the convention at that point. Her first convention was in 2018 in Traverse City, and she enjoyed the convention as long as it had nothing to do with the coins in that kind of point. And I tried the entire convention to get her to go out onto the doors. She's like, I don't want to go out there. Don't see. Well, we finally did Saturday afternoon, and she walked around. I collect half cents. She can't get the large cents right. She calls them whole cents in that kind of sense. But anyway, her comments as we walked around were, everything looks the same, everything looks the same. That kind of point. She came to Jim's table. She said, oh, I like that one. It's a $20 St. Paul's piece at Jim's table. He said, sit down, sit down. 45 minutes later, he and my wife were still talking in that kind of point. And that was Jim in that kind of sense. And so she didn't buy the $20 piece.
So we don't get many proof half cents in Durango, Colorado. But somebody handed one to me. It was encapsulated proof. I won't give you the year because that might give it away to somebody. But I said, I know nothing about these, but I know a guy I can send it to. So I sent it to Jim. He kept the point for 2 months. And he said, this could be a business trip. So it's not worth a lot. I'm going to send it back. And I could have sold it to him for $6,000. Okay? And maybe a little bit. But he said, no, it's probably a business trip. I'm it sold a month later for $25,000. And Jim bought it. I called him up and said, Jim, what's the deal here? He says, I had a customer that just absolutely wanted it, so.
Go to Tom.
Jim's lived in Western Pennsylvania as I do, and 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, before COVID, we were on the same airplane coming to an EAC meeting. I saw him get on, and everybody took off, and we were on our way. On that flight, there was a medical emergency, and I was sitting pretty far up front and didn't really participate in any way, just hoping for the best. Plane lands, everybody gets off, no signs of ambulances or anything like that, but there was a medical emergency on there. So a day or two later on the Bourse, I said, Jim, what happened on the airplane? He said, that was me. I don't know any details. You're not supposed to talk about that kind of stuff, but that's the way Jim was. No big deal, that was me.
Jim, really early on, I got really lucky. I was interested in early silver, which is still my primary interest. Someone recommended I talk to Jim, and that was like winning the numismatic lottery. And over the years as an advisor, the things I remember were a couple of things. One, you want to collect a series that's 40 or 50 years. 2, there's always more coins. And then 3, he told me there was a stretch coin once and I didn't get it, and I eventually went out and got it. Did he tell you there was a stretch coin? Yes. I mean, he told me so many times not to get something. He was always so honest, and he was one of my most cherished friends in the area, even though we hardly ever had a house. But he was just a terrific person, and I think the most amazing gentleman that we've had at Palms Grandkids Club. Very quiet guy. Anyway, we miss him.
Anybody else? The great Shao. Jerry could probably talk for the next 4 hours.
I could. He was on the floor that night too.
I'm sorry?
He was on the floor at Doug's house that night too. Doug's apartment.
Bob Showitz.
I have many, many stories to tell about Bob, but I'll spare some of the people in this room telling them. It is Jerry. But Bob was a very, very active and enthusiastic golfer, people I think knew. And I did play golf with Jerry, with Bob. And I am no golfer, though my son is. My nephew is, but not me. But Bob was like the world's worst enthusiastic golfer. He was even on the, you might have to help me, Jerry. He was on the advisory board for Golf Magazine and went to the top 100 golf courses all around the country and the world to play golf and shoot 105 or whatever he was capable of shooting.
The problem is, those change, about 8 of those change every year.
Yes.
So it's a constantly moving target for him.
Yeah, but he was a guy of great enthusiasms. And those of us that knew him well, I mean, he was just full of enthusiasm, sometimes outstripping his ability to support his habit. So he was known to have a fire sale at the end of a show where he bought 5 more things that he really loved to have, which meant that 4 other things that he used to love, they had to go.
And he just told you would never sell if you sold them. Then 5 minutes later, they're gone somewhere.
Bob was an enthusiastic golfer. As Chris said, maybe not the best golfer. I enjoyed the sport, but I was certainly by no means the best golfer. But I was at a fun show many years ago, and Bob came up to me and he said, Mark, I have a group going out to play golf. I know you play golf. I need a 4th for my foursome. Would you like to join us? Didn't tell me where we were going or anything about it, except he picked me up and took me to a golf course called Grand Cypress. And what an amazing place. It was an amazing time. That's right. With pretty amazing person.
When Bob graduated medical school, we spent a week at Pinehurst, South Carolina, playing golf, playing 54 holes a day, morning till night. Same caddy the whole time, double caddy. Elbert was his name. And just amazing, great friend. We grew up together in the EAC sort of group, and hanging out with Doug Smith in New York, who taught a lot of people how to do this, how to do it better. Doug taught the backup theory. And if you like something, get more than one of them. And he would say, if I don't have a first string and 2 backups, I get paranoid. And the first time I met him, for instance, that was at the Wayne Slife sale, which is when I met Bob as well. And Doug met us both at Stax at the auction. It wasn't Stax, it was Lester Merkin.
Do you remember what year that was?
72. 72. Were you with that too?
No.
Yeah. And we got blasted out by Ed Seneca. He just beat us all. We couldn't buy much of anything. But So we were licking our wounds, and Doug Smith came over and said, "Hey, come on over and stay at my place." We had nowhere to stay. We had no money. So we all hung out at Doug Smith's apartment, and it was Bob and a few of the young guys.
Was Virginia in that too?
Yeah, I think he might have been around one of them. We did it a number of times, so it's hard to say.
More than once.
But I remember the first time we got in there, we liked middle date large cents, and Doug said, "I hear you like middle date large cents. Here, look at these." And he passed us 2 9-inch boxes of large cents, and they were just as 18, 16s, and 17s. And they were all mid-state, and there were lots of duplications. And he just said, Doug would say, any excuse to keep more than one. And so it taught us. And we both had that habit through our lives of having more than one thing you like. Get those backup things, because they come in handy. And it makes, sometimes those couple of backups pay for the first strip one. So
That's cool, Joe.
it's more profitable.
Very good.
Dennis?
Bob and I were friends. He was a collector, I was a collector. He was a doctor by profession, and he was with a medical group practice. One day when we were at a coin show, he said, "Dan, I've got these doctors. They really want to get interested in coins. If you hear of a nice collection of large cents, let me know. I have the money. They're eager to spend it." I said, "Okay, I'll let you know." Saw him the next day. I said, "Bob, I got an idea for you. I know where there's a collection that has a reeded edge, 1795, has a starred reverse. In fact, it's complete by Sheldon numbers." It's complete by Sheldon numbers? But that sounds like your collection. I said, "You're right. It is." It is. You tell me about these doctors that really want to get into it. Well, here, they can start with a complete set and as a base and just work up from there. I said, "Hold on a minute." Goes away, makes a phone call, come back. "How much?" And we haggled mildly in a pleasant way. And that's what happened to my first set of odd cents in 1974. Purchased by the great Shal.
The great Shal. The great Shal.
David Lasso.
David.
Yes. I'm going to say a couple of things about him since I hired him to shoot things at EAC, and then I fired him for not producing all the things he was supposed to produce. But David was always a really nice guy. He was always a great friend. The last time I saw him was, I believe, at the ANA last summer. And I walked up to his table, and I did not recognize him. He was completely unrecognizable. I only knew who it was by seeing his wife behind the table. Saw her, said hi, and I, "Oh my God, that's David." He had been really, really sick for a while, and it finally got to him. But very, very nice guy, and contributed a great deal to numismatics, and you can see all of his videos on the New Numismatic Portal. Go ahead.
David worked as a videographer for Heritage for a number of years. So I had the pleasure of working with him very closely when we would do our video lot descriptions of different coins in our auctions. And we had a number of different people who would be on air. Most of them, he would have to do 3, 4, 5, 6 takes for each coin, and it would take forever. But then I would come in, and he would just start the camera, and I had all the scripts in front of me, and I would just start going through one script after another. And these are about a minute, minute and a half each. And typically, we would do about 100 of them in 5 or 6 hours, which nobody else could do. So he gave me a nickname. He called me Yellowstone because he said I was always the old faithful one.
It was a compliment.
Pretty nice, pretty nice.
I could think of a lot of non-complimental things that could go to. But very good. Anybody else?
David and I were very close, and I spoke to Debbie 2.5 weeks ago before we came here. I wanted her to know that we were doing this, and David would be one of the features here. He went in for a kidney stone, and he never came back. It was the saddest thing. Debbie was seeing her, visiting, I think in Alabama, if I have it correct. She was visiting an aunt of hers. And David, as soon as he got finished with the kidney stone, which was a routine thing, was going to go meet her in Alabama. It never happened. When she got the phone call, it was absolutely surreal, she said. It was just something, it was the conversation you don't ever want to have with anybody. We've got him stabilized. This, that, his heart, this, that. What do you mean? He's in there for a kidney stone. Now, I didn't have the nerve to ask her if there was an autopsy done. But David, how many times they'd be at our house just having, same thing, scotches and drinks. He always blamed me for getting him involved in scotch, and then I think Debbie hated me for that. But it was never to an excess. It was always moderation. It really was. But if you remember him at EAC conventions, he would be in here now, just like Leanna is doing, and he'd be videoing. Even when he didn't need to video, he was videoing. David, get out of my room. Karen and I want to go to bed. David, you're a good friend, but get the hell out. Ghost Debbie wants you. David was an unusual man. He, just like somebody else we're going to see soon, he was a friend to everybody. David.
Can I have one more? Sure. David was a very, very unusual person, and I think that many years earlier, he was like a television personality.
Yeah.
He had sort of many lives, and he was a very spiritual person.
Yes.
And he was really probably more of a Buddhist, Hindu kind of spiritually early in his life, and then later in life he became Catholic, which we are, and so I would see him at a Queen show, and he'd always say, Dominus Vobiscum, Chris, and that was very cool. So I want to say to David, Dominus Vobiscum.
Like so many of us in this room, there's more to you than just numismatics and coins. Unfortunately, we don't always get the chance to see that, but every once in a while you do. That's so cool.
They were due to come to our house.
Yes.
And when we were away, we were in Italy, but they were going to Long Beach, and they called and said, could we come up, because they'd stayed with us before.
Yeah.
And we were so sorry that we weren't there,
Yeah.
to share them. And then,
Yeah. We had the chance to call them friends, though.
Yeah.
That's good.
True qualities, people.
Anybody else? Anybody else?
Yeah, I didn't know David. I mean, I'm the new guy here in the room, but I just wanted to say I'm kind of indebted to him a little bit, because through his videos, it's been my late night TV for the last 6 months or something. So I feel like I knew a few of you guys before I even met you, like Mark and Bill and Chuck. I mean, just through David's videos. So I just wanted to say that it really made an impact on me and to help spark my interest and get me involved in the early American Coppers. So I just feel indebted to him, even though I never met him. So unfortunately, but yeah, he was a great work that he did. So
That's what we wanted to do.
Yeah, he would tell me, he said one of the greatest things he's done was he was able to record the seminars that we offer. He did that for several years, and it was, I'm eating it up now. He just really liked doing it. To him, it was not a job. Well, we didn't pay him, so.
Actually, that's not true. We did pay.
We did?
Yes, we did.
We gave him a room. We didn't pay him to do it. All right. Anybody else?
Wait, Leanna, are you listening?
There you go. I knew Howard Pitko, but I did not know he passed away. When the guys told me, that really surprised me. I had no idea. Howard Pitko. Anybody?
Well, Howard referred to himself as Dr. Pitko and Dr. Howard Spencer Pitko, the whatever, and he published a number of articles in Pennywise that detailed every single copper coin that he had ever collected in his life. Published lots of lengthy tables of what he had.
In his first, second, and third line collections.
Yes. and actually Harry can talk more about this than I can.
No, you go.
Well, he was also always the first in line for the EAC buffets.
Oh.
And he filled his plate very, very thoroughly, and he was otherwise really pretty quiet. He did do a seminar one year, which he had just been to China, and he had brought back a whole bunch of Chinese counterfeit large cents, and he was talking about them and showing them on the screen, and he was talking, oh, this is an 1804, and this dental isn't in the right place, and that A is tilted the wrong way, and this kind of stuff. The coin was standing on its edge, which means it could not possibly have been a mint product in the early 1800s. And he missed the elephant in the room. But he got the details. He was used to looking at die varieties, which so many of us are, and so many of us don't see the big picture because we're looking for something that's different or something that's unique. Sometimes we fail to see what's the same. And actually, I guess I'm tooting my own horn here because I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow afternoon. So,
Anybody else?
I'll say something. I don't really know why. Maybe I got seated at a meeting like this next to he and his wife, but he latched on to me for some reason, and we had completely different goals and understanding of numismatics, and he loved it in his way and I loved it in mine. I've never met a guy that was absolutely dedicated to completeness with almost no concern at all for quality. That's true.
that's absolutely true.
One time at Annapolis, he latched on to me early in the show, and he had this beat up 1800, but it was an S198. And there was a dealer trying to sell it to me. And it was, you know, if it wasn't S198, it was garbage, okay? And it was not a very nice coin. And he was starting, he says, what do you think of it all the time? And I don't, you know, that's not the way I think about coins like he did. And I said, it's rare, it's really rare, and you ought not to pass it up if you like it. He says, I really like it. But, you know, it's going to be $75 or $125 or whatever it was, you know, and he thought, well, for this grade, that's a little expensive. And yeah, but when you have a chance and opportunity at S198, you won't pass it up. I didn't say, especially you shouldn't pass it up. But Howard was, he would latch on to me, and he would try to spend as much time with me. And this isn't about me, but he used to love to follow me around and pick at me, and I just, it was a mixture of pure joy, the way he was like a little puppy dog, and yet it was annoying. And so I really developed a love for Howard Pitko in a way that you probably picked up a little bit from his articles when he'd send in and he'd list the 5 coins that he found for the last 3 or 4 months or something, and you kind of go, gee, okay. And so Howard, I miss it, I do.
Yes, he was a very, 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 very serious collector of early copper. He was as obsessed as any of us. And he was very happy to share his obsession with us in Pennywise.
That's right.
And he always had the Roman numeral of the sequence of articles he had written. So I don't know, how many did he get up to, Harry?
I don't know, 17, 18, 22, I don't know.
And it would always have the Roman numerals after the title.
And I don't know if this health was failing near the end. I assume it may have been failing for some time, because the last article he sent us, he said, this is my last article. And that was about a year and a half before he passed away.
Hey, Harry, didn't he receive the editor's award?
Don't recall.
No, he did.
I don't think so.
That was a trick question.
That was a trick question. Thanks, Mark. I will say another personal note about Howard. When my little brother died unexpectedly in 2017, I had a number of emails and cards in the mail and that sort of thing. But Howard was one of the few people that picked up the phone and called me, and I'll never forget that.
In his defense, for enumerating all of his articles, he was a scientist, and he was used to publishing in scientific journals, and that's the kind of thing we did. Okay, so that was the world he lived in when he wasn't doing coins.
Yeah, he was a PhD physiologist and medical school professor at Temple.
So, in 2014, when I had the convention in Colorado, the club brought me around. I was wondering. And one of the members didn't have a place to stay. So I said, well, you can sleep on the couch. It was a big room. But they had a meeting in the room beforehand. And Chuck and Howard were drinking scotch.
Oh,
And they
don't tell them
argued.
that story.
They argued. Argued until about 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
And the guy says, don't ever invite me to your room again. First night sleep I ever had. You remember that?
I'm not proud of that. We had a bing bang that night. We wanted to kill each other. And then we realized we're in Dan's room. Was Jenny in there too?
No.
I actually bought his wife flowers the next day. I did not. Thanks, Dan.
Okay,
Moving on.
Walter Husak.
Before we say anything about Walter Husak, Patricia, his wife, his little young grandson at UI, come on, stand up. UI's lovely lady, Brenna.
Yes.
Trina, we all know Trina, his daughter. Melanie, Patricia's daughter. Husak family's here tonight. By the way, is there any other family members of anybody we've talked about? We should ask that. But they're all here tonight, and they wanted to be here because I think of the absolute love that we all had for all these guys. But Walter, how could you not love Walter?
We still have.
Thank you for being here.
A couple of quick words for me, since I was not even a large cent collector, and like everybody else, I loved Walter. He had everything that you want. He was a wonderfully nice guy, a great person to spend a good time with, and he had all the coins that you couldn't afford to have. So he was happy to share them. So it's exactly what EAC is about if you can afford to collect those coins. Unlike the rest of us. Anybody? Bob.
Bob. Actually, coincidence thing. I was following the Husak collection on my computer. Next morning I get on the shuttle bus to go to work, and I hear somebody talking about the Husak collection, so I chatted him up. It turns out to be Dennis, which is, so Walt was kind of responsible for me getting into early copper. I remember Walt saying, Bob, you got to get a 93 Liberty Cap. Well, on my budget, I couldn't afford a 93 anything at that point. But I actually did get one, and so it was, when I got it, I let Walt know, hey, I followed what you said. Granted, the grade was like a fair 2, but, So anyway, the EAC in Ohio ran into Walt a few months before at Long Beach, and I said, yeah, I'm going to go to Ohio, and I'm going to do a road trip. He says, okay, well, can you take my cases? So I said, yeah, why not? I got room in the car, fold the back seats down, it'll barely fit in. So older son lived in Ventura at the time, so Walt says, well, come up and get him and we'll all go wine tasting. So we go up there and get the cases, go wine tasting, and so Walt brings out his Cadillac convertible, which was really cool because my dad had the same year Cadillac, so it was great for me. I always said that I liked Walt, I loved Pat because at the time, daughter-in-law was very, very pregnant with the first grandson. And so we're going wine tasting. She's 7 months pregnant, she can't drink. So Pat kind of acted like the surrogate mother, and every winery we would go to, Pat would go and make sure that they had something, some beverage that Carly could drink. And, you know, just the thing about Walt was that if you wouldn't really know that he had money at all and how he treated people. He treated you the same if you were somebody very, very wealthy or somebody who was just starting out and collecting, and he would give the same enthusiasm no matter who you were. I considered him a deep friend, and we had planned a few months before he passed away that I was going to bring his cases up to this one. And I kind of miss that. I miss him. He was he defined who a member of EAC should be. I miss him deeply.
Thanks, Bob. Anybody else?
Chuck? Can I read this again?
Pardon?
Can I read this again?
Oh, please, please do. Listen to this.
I wrote some words that I shared with a few of you Wednesday evening at the Boys of 94 meeting, but I wanted to share with all of you. Eli, Brenna, you weren't there. Trina, you weren't there. Pat, Melanie, you were there. When I look through provenance information of past collectors from a century or more ago, I often wonder, what were they like as individuals? What was Dr. Henry Beckwith like? What kind of person was Lauren Parmalee? What about Howard Newcomb, George Clapp, and so many others? 100 years from now, long after all of us are gone, collectors might ask, what was Robinson Brown like? Or Dan Holmes? Or Walt Husak? Or many of the others that we've talked about tonight? Those of us that are here tonight, we're fortunate. We know the answer. We know that they were talented businessmen, but more importantly, they were kind and warm-hearted individuals whose friendship we cherished.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we're not. I have so many things. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, good.
Sorry.
Yes, Bob's got.
So I just wanted to say a couple of things about Walt. Walt and I never met Walt before his first sale, but I bought a couple of coins on his sale. And then later, as I got to know Walt, the picture is very appropriate because I would challenge anybody in this room. Now, maybe Patricia or Trina have one, but I've never seen a picture of Walt that he didn't have a smile on his face. I mean, he was the most genuinely giving, and he enjoyed life more than anybody I probably have ever met in my life. And that sort of was something that kind of coupled us together, and we became really good friends in a period of 5 or 6 years. And certainly I miss him being here, but what he gave me and what I learned, and sharing his family with me and his home, I mean, you know, what else can you say? It was Walt.
It's great. Dennis?
So my Walter story, well, I could tell a few, but I'll choose the first one, which was the day I first met Walter and Pat, and it was my first EAC convention. And so 2001, Fredericksburg, Virginia. I had my daughter with me, the poor child I was inflicting, numismatics onto her at an early age. She was probably 14 or thereabouts, and we were just in the hotel lobby. We were sort of checking in, and this gentleman and his wife approached us and just, introduced us to Walt. This is Walt, this is Patricia, and we exchanged that. And, are you here for the convention? Yes, and oh, okay. And, we exchanged pleasantries, and then we just kind of went our various ways. I just thought, oh, wow, this is a really great club. This is really, if these strangers would come up and approach us. And then later that evening, I went to the happenings, and one of the varieties that was featured at the happenings that year was 1794 Sheldon 59. And so the table had a lot of coins out there. I would think maybe a dozen, coins, all brown except for a glowing red gem right in the middle of the group. I kind of looked at it and said, wow! And the guy who was behind the table, I'm sorry, I don't remember who that was, but he said, oh yeah, that's Walter's coin. So I put two and two together and said, oh, there might be more to this gentleman than meets the eye. And sure enough, it was just the tip of the iceberg when it came to Walter and his collection. And that's just a wonderful memory. I really appreciate the whole thing. Oh, and just one more little final note about it was, while I was admiring that glowing gem, Chuck Heck, and I think Dan Trellin might have been accompanying him, he was bringing a group of people over to that table to get a different coin out, and this coin had a big die cut at the bottom that nobody had seen before on the reverse. And it was about a good 4 maybe. And they're all crowded around this G4 kind of admiring it. And I'm going, yeah, but look at this one over here.
That was the latest dice sig of Sheldon 59. It was Fred Borchardt's coin. And the only other one like it, it's in Jesse's collection up at the A&S. Or it's not Jesse's collection. So when I saw that, I didn't know Fred had one. I said, well, I know where there's a duplicate. And anyway, yeah, I remember that. That was a big night. That was the night when I said, I'm going to try to collect die states of 94s, and eventually I'm going to do a book. So I got the book done, but I was never able to collect all the die states of all the 94s. But anyway, yeah, that was a great night.
My story about Walt, I think, exemplifies him to a T. I met Walt at Long Beach in probably 90 or 91, and talked to him for a few minutes. It was at Tom's table where, at the time, it seemed like EACers congregated. And then about 3 months later, we had a small coin show near my house, and we went to it. The show probably had 20 dealers, and if there was $20,000 worth of coins in the room, that would have been a lot. And Phil and I are standing, we're going around the tables, and Walt walks up to us, and we had only met him 3 months before, remembered our names, and he says, I think I have something you'd like to see. And he hands me a slab. And I looked at it, and I immediately realized that it was the S-48 that he had recently purchased from Bowers.
And I just kind of froze because I'd never held a coin that expensive. And he just handed it to me. We looked at it for a minute, talked to him about it, and he said, "Can you tell me where the bathroom is? I need to go to the bathroom." And he walked away. And he left the coin in my hand. And I literally stood there until he got back.
I would say we've had a lot of wonderful times with Walter, Dan and I and Patricia, vacations, Puerto Vallarta. I miss him so much. Patricia and I have always said we've had the best looking younger men.
I only met Walt a couple times, but it is something that everybody here should learn to smile. That is one thing that really helps customers, and he had it down to the science. We all need to smile with and enjoy to our customers.
You know, you're all saying very nice things about him. He wasn't all that nice. If you were at the boys' meeting, I told you, you know I'm a CPA, and during tax season, I'm very busy. I don't practice anymore. But he had this uncanny knack of calling me during tax season and saying, "Chuck, what are you doing?" I said, "Walter, I'm working. I'm doing tax returns. I got to get things done here, you know." And I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, Terry and I, his partner Terry at HK Fittings, we're looking at coins." I said, "Walter, I'm hanging up on you. I don't want to hear this." Okay, now that's just the side thing. But the thing that really kills you, he had this uncanny knack of being illogical. When he sold that collection for the $10 million back in 2008, right? And Patricia and he, was that house in San Ynez that you bought right around that time? After that, right, yes, but you bought the house. So he calls me up, and it wasn't during tax season, but he goes, "Chuck, you know, the coins, $10 million, he goes, and we got the house." He goes, "Now Patricia wants to furnish it." What? "You sold the coins for $10 million. He goes, "Yeah, but I didn't make a profit of $10 million. I said, "Let her furnish it." You know, he had this uncanny knack of just making me crazy. Anyway, to Walt.
One last thing. Right after the collection sold, it was mentioned on Saturday Night Live.
What?
Really?
Saturday.
Nobody talks about
Walt was also in Pawn Stars, wasn't he?
Yeah. Or as Chuck and his wife would pronounce it, porn stars.
What's wrong with that? How do you spell New York? Ready to go for Rich?
Yeah, just a couple real quick things that Walt really had helped my collecting ability, because he would bring his duplicates after he upgraded and everything. And some of the nicest coins that I have came from Walt's case there. And the other thing is, last year at the Bland sale, I sat next to Walt and Pat, and I had such a great time watching them have so much fun at that sale. And I was able to purchase one more coin at that show there from Walt. So, thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Do we have to end this? I mean,
We do have some more people to talk about.
Well, I'm going to finish the one thing with Walt, but I think it was really remarkable as so everybody Walter came in touch with just left enthused about whatever he was enthused about.
That's true.
And so when we mention guys like Terry, his partner, who magically was collecting coins, or his accountant Martin, they formed the Cardinal Foundation to get some of that, and he was just that guy. He was just a guy that you love to be around. And he just spread enthusiasm. And I guess the blessing I would wish on him was there's the old part of a poem that if someone would give us to see ourselves as others see us, I hope Walter did see himself as the rest of us saw us, because he was a very loved man.
Here, here. Another gentleman I didn't have the pleasure of knowing, Benjamin Marcello. Anybody have anything to say about him? Is anybody close to him? Was he in EAC? No, I know he was. I'm sorry, I have no knowledge of this gentleman. Well, Benjamin? Well, here you are. Birdman. Doug Bird.
I taught some classes with Doug, and he really taught me a lot about being a coin dealer, handling early copper. One time we had this really successful class at the summer seminar. Everybody loved it. The whole class comes back for copper tooth. And Doug's like, all right, I'm going to bring some of my special stuff this time. Usually he just brings some normal stuff. And so Doug comes to this thing and he starts handing me stuff like die progression sequence of 1823 restrikes in white metal, or like an 1810 restrike. He's just casually handing me. Well, what are you doing, Doug? Where did you even find this stuff? One of my favorite things about Doug, though, is that if you ever ask him when he created a coin, he just pointed the price.
That's right.
I graded $200. I graded $2,000. I really miss Doug. He's a really good dude.
50 years ago next month, the July 1973 issue of Pennywise carried the names of several new members of EAC. Doug Bird was member number 309 because his name started with B.I. There was another fella whose name started with B.O.
Who could that be?
There was member number 312. So Doug always held that against me. The same issue also carried the name of another member, Bill Noyce. He had a higher number.
Yes. 50th anniversary for Mark Warpart. Congratulations, Mark. You're an old man.
Speaking of anniversaries, a lot of us hooked up for the first time, I bet a few of you in this room as well, at the Frank Masters sale by Rarecoa. What was that, 1871?
71.
And that's where Doug Bird, I first met Doug. He bought the wonderful starred reverse in there for pretty cheap, as you would think about it now. And I remember Bob Schumann showed up and caught the 19B, misattributed as an 18B.
That's right, I know that was that sale.
And I was, my mentor was Eddie Milas, who had bought the collection from Frank Masters and Joliet. And with the profits he made on that deal, I actually roomed that night with my girlfriend at the time, with Eddie Milas at the hotel there, where the sale was. And he was up all night long talking to Switzerland, buying gold coins with his profits from the Masters sale. And he flopped that over and bought Rarecoa the next year. So it was a very successful enterprise. And so a lot of us met there. Eddie Milas, because I was a kid who worked for him in the 60s. He worked out of Carson Perry Scott shop and department store. And he gave me in the Masters sale unlimited credit for a year because he liked me. So I bought Mid-State Wreath cents and 94s and things like that because unlimited money. Why not? To give it a chance. So Doug and I became really good friends after that, talked all the way through this, and I stayed at his place many, many times during Long Beach shows at Hermosa Beach. And we would travel to Long Beach together and just talk incessantly about everything. Just a great guy with fabulous eye for it, and a wonderful dealer, and personable, and wonderful. It's just sad to miss these people.
Remember how he liked to say, if you showed him a coin, he always had a better one. And if he had it with him, he would show it to you and say, this is what they're supposed to look like.
Absolutely.
Doug Bird.
Jerry mentioned the master sale, which for the old timers is one of the pivotal events, one of the great events of my early collecting career. I remember Dennis Loring and I were roommates at that, and the story with Bob Schumann, and of course the great wet coin that Jack Collins was on the other end bidding against the Fitzgerald family, and I remember yelling in the phone, "Stop, Jack, stop!" as they were running it up. But Doug Bird was a good friend, as a Southern California guy. We frequently met, and he had a private collection, as you know, that was separate from his stock. And in that collection, over the last 20 years, I've been putting together the finest set that I can. I think that exists the early first half of the major heads from 1816 up to when they mechanized in the 30s. And Doug had a couple of coins that were absolutely fabulous. And I would always ask him about them, and he would say, no, in my private collection. And let me regress for just a minute. My first experience with him in really a business was back in 1979. There was Central States sale that was going on at the time, and it had perfect VF30 S3. And I was going to go back to this Central States Convention, so he asked me to buy it for him, or to bid for him. And in 1979, I was selling a lot of my own coins, early dates. I was selling lots of 94s. That's another story, right out of those 94s. Didn't involve Doug. And I was trying to get my first house that I wanted to live in for the rest of my life. I lived in Ventura, California, and I was 33 years old and wanted to buy a house on the side of the hill overlooking the ocean in the city. And that was a big deal for me. So I was selling almost all my coins. And Doug said, will you go back there for me and buy this and a couple of other things? Well, I was struggling selling beautiful EF94s for $300 or $400 and this kind of thing to save up for a house. And I had maybe $15,000 or $20,000 saved for down payment. And he sent me back there, and I really didn't put a lot of thought into what this was going to involve. So I raised my hand and got that S3 and a couple other coins for him, and I went to pick them up. And they gave me a bill for $33,000. And I know I'd never seen $33,000. So I had to get on that plane and directly and went straight home. And said, Doug, we got to get some money into my account because I'm going to be in trouble. And thank goodness that they didn't have that electronic process. Because there was that 3 or 4 day lag before it came through the bank. And so Doug was very good about that. It was a beautiful coin. He loved the coin and the others that I bought for him. And he made my trip worthwhile a little bit. It helped out. But the final thing about Doug is that I was constantly pestering him. And the 2 coins that I wanted that he had were the 1824 overdate, which was one of only 3 misstatements. Bob Roman says it's just about as good as the Fitzgerald coins. And in 1819 is a 3, which you may know is the close stars to the 1819 date, and that's a red Mincy 65. And nobody else had seen those pretty much in his lifetime, but I knew he had. And I always talk about them. And I saw him begin to slow down, and he told me he wasn't really well. He was thinking about retiring. And then he called me one day and said, you want to buy those 2 coins? I said, yeah. So he quoted me a price. It almost didn't matter what it was because I wasn't going to have a hold of any of those anywhere else. And he sold them to me. And then a month or 2 later, I learned that he consigned his whole collection to be sold. And of course, he didn't. He passed away. And, so I appreciate that as a friend who knew what I was interested in and didn't think and thought about me at the very end and how much I wanted those 2 coins. I just wish I could have had more time with him to thank him and to appreciate it. And he went so quickly. And that was a sad moment for me. So I have fond memories and always will of Doug.
Yes, Doug. David Wang. David Wang is a member. Anybody have anything they would like to say about David? Gary. Gary?
David Lang was the authority on coin books, coin boards. And I had run across a coin board and didn't know too much about it. He wrote a number of articles in the Numismatist about coin boards. And I sent him an email with a simple question about it and figured at some point I'd get a response. Well, I was sitting in my office one day and the secretary rings me, "You got a call." I said, "From whom?" "To David Lang." And I'm going, "What?" So somehow he got a hold of my office number, got on the phone, and spent a good 15 or 20 minutes not only answering my question, giving me all kinds of knowledge and information about coin boards. I figured, well, maybe the guy now is going to try to sell me some because he's got a bunch of them. And I asked him, "Well, you have what I'm looking for, large thin coin boards?" He says, "Nope, don't have anything I can sell right now. Anything at some point comes up in the future, maybe I will, but I've got a couple of people ahead of you who are interested in them." So this is a gentleman who would take the time out, call somebody, give them information on something they didn't know, and I appreciated that very much. I thought he was a gentleman, he had a lot of information, and he was willing to share it with somebody who didn't have that kind of knowledge.
I knew David was collecting coin boards. He was getting really quite a book on them. And I only had a couple. They come in a lot of books from my library that were on my shelf. And I had emailed them, I'll bring them to a show that was one of the AAs or something. And I brought them, he's like, "Well, that's common, that's common. That's kind of a nice one." "Oh my God, I've never seen this one before." Which are the words you always love to hear. And he said, "Is this for sale?" I'm like, "No, not for sale." And later in the show, we crossed paths with each other. He's like, "Are you sure you don't want to sell?" I said, "No, not for sale." At the end of the show, I handed it to him and said, "I told you it wasn't for sale. It's a gift." And he was the same type of person. If somebody really appreciated something that wasn't his main collecting area, he would get it to you and would share his knowledge. And just an impeccable researcher, so he's missed. I didn't know he was an EAC member, but I'm not surprised because he got the information, even if he wasn't collecting the actual coins. So, good guy.
I do have one observation, Chuck.
You're talking to me now, not the group?
I'm talking to you now.
Did I do something wrong? Yes,
Well,
I did.
David Lang left us too early, but he was not born in 1953. He was born in 1958. So he was...
It could be my fault, or you said something.
Anyway, he was...
fault that he was born in
58.
So he was 64 years old. He left us, like many, he left us too early.
Yeah.
He was a extraordinarily knowledgeable and very quiet individual. He worked for NGC for many years. He did their variety attributions. He did their research. I believe he was their research director. He was, at coin shows, he was very free to share his knowledge with anybody. And I think that's what I remember most about him. It's just another person that I will certainly miss.
He spoke at one of our conventions.
He did. He was a Friday night speaker at one of our conventions.
The thing I liked about him a real lot is I had some conversations with him. He was a wonderful numismatist from the respect that he was very curious about things. I always wanted to spread out in a new direction and learn a new thing. And a number of times, because I like really goofy coins that nobody can describe or attribute as whatever they are from history somewhere, And he bought a number of those from me through the years. I remember a couple in particular, they were really wonderful. I had a 1860 over 59 British penny in mint state, really rare coin. And I had a pretty high price on it, so it was in my inventory for a while. And he loved it. And went to a great home, and he exactly knew what it was, which was pretty rare. So I respect that deeply. Anybody.
In the January Pennywise, we published a letter from David that actually came to me as a string of emails, 3 or 4 of them. And it was kind of a run-on kind of composition. And I thought, why is this coming this way? And it gets to the end of the last one, and he says, I'm so tired, I'm going to keel over if I try and type any more. And, you know, like 2 weeks later, he was gone.
Anybody?
David Lang.
This is our final gentleman that we're celebrating.
One more.
Ron Tagney.
We have one more after this.
We do?
For Jasper. Go ahead. No.
Ron Tagney died back in May. He was a Florida resident. We were always at the Palm Beach Coin Club, the Palm Beach Coin Show, monthly show. He'd come with his wife, Brooke. She was the love of his life, and when she got cancer and was going through hell, he lost a lot of interest in many things. She died a few years ago, quite a few years ago, if I remember correctly. And Ron just, I don't want to say he gave up, but he wanted me to look at his collection. I know he consigned it to, Chris, I think it was you. Didn't you sell his coins? Do you remember?
I sold some of his coins, yes.
Some of his coins? Yeah. Anyway, but he was just a kind and gentle man. Very, he was there. But anybody want to say anything about Ron? Yes.
Ron wrote a book in 1857 about the depression that occurred after the USS Central America went down. And John used that in one of his exhibits for when he did the 1857s. So we thank Ron for that book.
Good boy. Anybody else?
There's one.
There's one more.
There was supposed to be one more. Ed Jasper.
Oh, yeah. You know, I called Sonia. I couldn't find anything on him.
Yeah, we couldn't find a picture of him.
A picture? I couldn't get an obituary.
He was somebody else.
Who did we miss?
He was Steve Carr.
Steve Carr.
I thought we did something else. We don't do it.
Not tonight you did.
We did for Steve before.
I thought we
had another meeting. But we can talk about Steve Carr too.
Okay.
Wait,
And I
Jim here?
apologize. I
It's
tried
right
to
there.
have
Yeah,
this
right.
heard.
So let's talk about Ed Jasper for a minute, and then we'll talk about Steve. Ed was the chair of the one EAC convention that I did not attend in Dallas. I could not go that year because I had 3 things that same weekend, all of which required my attention, and I could only do one of them, and that's the one time EAC lost out.
Was that 2008?
Yes.
Ed and Stu Hodge, who passed away many years ago, they had done a few previous EAC conventions in the Dallas area, in Grapevine, I think North Dallas, back in the 80s. And when we were conducting the 2008 convention in Dallas, there were a few of us involved. Chris, I think you were involved. Is John Bergner here? No, John Bergner was involved with that. Russ Butcher, and Ed Jasper and myself. So we kind of did the 2008 convention sort of as a committee, and there was one of my favorite restaurants, Abuelos, in Plano, Texas, was sometimes the site of our committee meetings.
That's right.
But Ed really guided the rest of us through the whole process of conducting EAC Convention. So he was a very important part of that whole process.
Go ahead.
I would just say when I first started collecting large cents, I attended in the early 2000, 2001 or 2, a couple of auctions, superior auctions in Los Angeles. I didn't know what the heck I was doing at all. And I happened to be sitting next to Ed viewing some lots prior to the auction. And so he befriended me a little bit and was chatting. And I'd start looking at these coins and I started depending on it. And I'd say, Ed, how much, what would be a reasonable bid for a coin like this? And he'd say, well, you shouldn't bid more than $200 for that coin. Otherwise, you'd kind of be taken. And so I looked at the next one, the same thing, and he kind of guided me through the whole process. And subsequently, I wound up buying a number of coins from his collection, duplicates. And he would sort of show me the coin, and he'd say, well, how would you grade this? And I said, oh, I don't know. This is a bit later. And I'd say, well, maybe this is a 40 coin. He said, well, no, it's probably more like a 50 coin. And I said, okay, Ed, but look, we'll price it like a 40 coin anyway. And so he'd sell it to me. He was just always so fair and such a quiet but a nice guy. And I had limited contact with him, but I appreciated his help to me when I was just getting started.
Very good. Anybody else? Well, that brings us to Steve Carr. I'm going to say a couple of things.
I want to apologize.
Yeah.
May I?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So this is really both for Steve and for Doug. I will say, with apologies to your father, that I kind of looped both of them together. It was always kind of a lifelong ambition of me to go attend summer seminar. So I had a chance to do that in 2016. And I was very blessed that the two instructors that I had were Steve Carr and Doug Burke. And Jim, you're a little bit humble as to describe how that first copper class went. So we had about a dozen people. We had 4 YNs, 2 that are very notable and active in the ANA with Garrett Zeiss and Abby Zekman. All the way to more of us old-timers. And that class had so much fun together. And Jim can attest to this. The class went to Doug and Steve and demanded that they were going to do the second version of it the following year. And I don't know how your dad did it, but I think he was putting together and scrambling together a curriculum for a year to basically put advanced early American copper together. And you're absolutely right. I don't know where Doug found any of all of those coins that he pointed, but it was just absolutely amazing. And this whole class, if you can imagine, it had come from all over the country. They all came back the second year. And it was like the biggest reunion you ever saw. And I remember talking to your dad. And I'm sure he's looking down on you right now. Very proud, because I know where you're going in the next day or two to continue his legacy. And I know he's very proud that you're continuing the legacy that he continued at the ANA Summer Seminar. So I'm sorry he's not on there, but I know that it was during this period of time, and I don't want to forget either one of them. They're the reason I'm here. So, thank you.
He was definitely a good friend to me. I can tell you that for several conventions that I had chaired and wanted to have him and Doug do the seminar, the Reagan seminar, and he never returned my emails. Sometimes I think your mom would return my emails, you know, but he never returned my emails. And I thought for a long time that I didn't have his real address, but they never bounced back. He just didn't respond. But he is, I think, possibly the only person, there's only 2 people in the club, Dana's the other one, that I personally sold a large cent directly to. And you know that coin? It's a nice 1807. I think you were with him when he bought it. It was a beautiful coin. I was trying to close up and go home from the convention, and he kept me there and kept looking at it, looking at it. I said, well, I gotta go, do you want it? And he said, yes, and he gave me, I was surprised, he gave me the check. He was a wonderful guy, wonderful guy.
As the EAC historian, I was doing some investigation of some of the various members, and I discovered that Steve Carr was originally from suburban Dayton, Ohio, from the town of West Carrollton, Ohio. Well, it turns out that my wife's grandparents were from West Carrollton, Ohio.
We don't say that 4-letter word, by the way.
Ohio.
Shh. Go blue.
Emily is giving us that look again.
I'm down, Emily.
So,
She's way over there, she can't hurt us.
right?
Oh, she's got
So,
just a few hours.
I had a moment to chat with Steve, and I was asking him about West Carrollton, and he said, well, yeah, my dad worked for an envelope company in West Carrollton. And I looked at him and said, you're kidding. Was it American Envelope Company? He said, yeah. Well, my wife's grandfather was the secretary-treasurer of American Envelope Company. And they were there at the same time and certainly knew each other. That was just one of those small world stories.
Mabel Ann.
I'd like to also remember Steve Carr. We were on our way to EAC in Colorado Springs, Colorado in 2014, and we were rear-ended by a Peterbilt on I-40 in Missouri. Here we were. What are we going to do? And I thought, Steve lives in Kansas City or Overland Park or somewhere nearby. Well, try to get his phone number and call. And we did. And he said, sure, I'll come and get you. And he took care of us and his wife, Kathy. And it was just such a blessing. And so on the way back, we were able to stop. We did. He helped us get a rental car. And I mean, here we were. And we're able to still come because Steve helped us that time. Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Well, I just want to finish up by having that in my face.
Yeah.
Let's just not look at it, okay? I just want to say that I was struck by the fact that a number of the people who we just honored were born after I was, and I feel a little bit mature tonight because of that. And I'm looking around at all of you, and I'm saying I sincerely hope that next year we won't be talking about any of you at a Friday night remembrance like this. I'm just wishing everybody the best, and I want to just summarize by saying that all of these people were what EAC is about. Can you imagine any other coin club that would be having an event like this? I don't believe such a club exists other than EAC. And I'm going to shut up, but there's one more thing to do tonight, and Mark Borkert has it. Go ahead, David.
Before you go, Mark, I just want to say thanks, guys. It was really nice hearing your thoughts about that.
There are 4 individuals in the room who I've asked to come up and join me. Dane, Dennis, John, and Mabel Ann. In 1969, Herb Silverman invited some of the then current EAC members to drop by and spend an evening. He said, if you can, you're invited to swing by. And there were 29 individuals that came by. This was at the Philadelphia A&A, and my understanding is they came one evening and they did not leave until something like 5 or 6 o'clock the next morning. But all 29 of them signed this exact copy of Sheldon's Early American Sense. And first of all, I want to make a public thank you to Dave Nielsen. He actually acquired this copy from a David Fanning literature auction about 14 years ago. And he has just, as of today, donated this book to the EAC History Archives. So he has donated it to all of you. So, thank you. Of the 29 people that signed this book, there were names like Herbert Silverman, Art Kagan, Paul Munson, Del Bland, Ned Bush, Walter Green, Doug Smith, and many others. But there were 5 people that signed this that are still active in EAC today, and 4 of them are up here. Mabel Ann, I think you should be center, and you should be holding the book open. And Emily wanted to get a photo of the 4 of them. She suggested that, so there they are. Then Bob, why don't you come on up? And Emily also wanted to have another photo with the 4 of them and the outgoing and incoming EAC presidents.
And we're not going to talk about how old I was in 1969. We could,
Go
but...
blue.
Okay, let me tell you that I was told after presidential pardons, you're not getting it.
Wait a minute. Thank you.
Good job. And I would just like to make one more toast, if you don't mind. We've toasted those that have left us way too soon. And I think from what Bill and I talked about between the 2 of us, we want to toast you.
Yes. Here, here.
Every one of you.
Yes. Maybe talk about you this way next year.
You're what makes us